Hello, I'm Jeff McKinney, and I'm doing my final paper presentation on the impact of the Russian Orthodox Church on the native people of Alaska, 1741 until 1912. On July 15th, 1741, Alex Cherikov, commander of St. Paul, one of the ships of the Second Bering Expedition, recorded sighting what had been assumed to be Lewinsky Inlet on the northwest coast of Chichagof Island. He reported a broad harbor at 57 degrees 15 minutes north latitude. 10 armed men in a longboat were sent ashore to explore the land. Days passed and the men failed to return. A second boat went out, but it too disappeared. Smoke from fires on shore could be seen, but 3 weeks passed and nothing was seen of the missing men. Some of the natives in two small canoes paddled out from the bay where the boats had gone. When Cherikov tried to entice the people in the canoes to come aboard St. Paul, both canoes turned away. On July 27th, Cherikov and his officers decided to return to Kamchatka, which is in Asia. St. Paul had no small boats left, and without them it was impossible to send parties ashore to obtain critically needed fresh water. As an aside to this, during the readings, particularly in Russell, on page 232 of our readings from the American Indian Quarterly, volume 33, number 2, spring 2009, which goes from pages 230 to 253. Mark Jacobs Jr., a man who I've met and in fact congratulated me in 1996 after I joined the the Alaska Native Brotherhood in Sitka. So I've met him. He's a Tlingit elder, and he recounted the Tlingit version of this story. These stories are very, very well known among the Tlingit people regarding this particular crew of Alex Cherikov. And they, of course, had a different version that we read in our readings just a couple of weeks ago. So according to Mike Jacobs Jr., who I know to be of Sitka, these three men did not return to their ship. They took this opportunity to escape the cruel and harsh conditions of the Russian ship. As they left the ship, they decided amongst themselves that they would eventually perish in the hazardous waters of the North Pacific. Why suffer such a cruel command until then? The decision to desert was easy. They eventually made contact with some local natives and were accepted and treated with respect instead of being murdered as Russian history tells it. So this is a little aside from what I've always understood that happened to those men. So again, this is the Tlingit version. I happen to know Mr. Mark Jacobs Jr., and so he continued that they married Tlingit women, and all went well until they spotted another Russian ship approaching. They explained that they would be shot or hanged if they were ever captured, so there was a hasty preparation to load them, as well as their family, into the canoes that were provided to them. Their offspring became some of the most prominent families in the village of Klowak. Now, Alexei Cherikov was the commander of the St. Paul in the same expedition of Vitus Bering. The Bering expedition had two ships, and the other ship was the St. Peter, which was actually commanded by Bering himself. Of course, the Bering Straits of Alaska were named after him. Now, in 1741, then, Vitus Bering mapped the coast of Alaska. It happened that on that expedition that they became split from each other, and so Alexei Cherikov's St. Paul was separate at the time when the men left the ship and never returned. It was the same expedition, but he was separated by that time from Vitus Bering in the St. Peter. And so they continued on their own missions separately. And so, again, Peter's Bering mapped the coast of Alaska, and he discovered the richness of the furs in this part of America that resulted in the Russian Russian men coming over to the American continent, basically because of the furs, the riches that the furs. So these common men, the Shalinki, brought many things with them, and they brought with them their religious traditions. And some of them were Orthodox, and it was these Orthodox laypersons in bringing their Orthodox faith to North America who baptized the first North American converts. And remember, this began shortly after 1741. So, in continuation of our story, we go to Grigory Shelikov. He was the chief of the Northeastern American Company, and of course, he was interested in the profits that these furs could bring. But he's also interested in the native people themselves, and he wanted to treat the native people with as much tenderness and goodwill as possible. And he sincerely seemed to want to help the native people. So in the summer of 1874, Commander Shelikov shipped out from Russia for Kodiak Island. Shelikov believed that sending annual expeditions to America for trade was both expensive and dangerous. So he actually was there with the plan on establishing a permanent base so that he wouldn't have to travel back and forth. And his expedition, of course, met resistance from the local Kodiak Aleut. So Kodiak, of course, is about 900 miles due west of Sitka. So they didn't go as far as Sitka now. They're back in Kodiak. And Kodiak, of course, is the land of the Aleuts.